guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's episode of Intuitive Angling, and thanks a lot for taking some time to hang out with me today and check the video out. I really appreciate that. And guys, today it's September 1st. I want to talk to you guys about why September 1st is a critical date in the year in terms of a shift in what the bass do. There are certain times of the year and there are certain specific weeks during the year that you notice bass do stuff different. They're making, it's definitely a definitive change in the lures they prefer and the areas they get into. And for me, September 1st marks one of those dates. So I want to talk a little bit about why that is, what causes that, and give you guys some tips and advice on how to take the advantage of catching bass specifically during the month of September in today's episode. Also, guys, big thank you out there to everybody who's taking time to hit that subscribe button here at Intuitive Angling, man. Appreciate all the people that have supported the channel doing that. It's free and easy if you haven't had a chance. Right now, we've only got about 35% of our viewers that are subscribed to the channel, so that's a good way to help Intuitive Angling out. If you like the content here, is hit that subscribe button. And also, guys, thank you very much for everybody that has continued to use all the links I put in my video descriptions. You guys know that I put my Tackle Warehouse link and the Solar Bat and the jig lures and Fish the Moment lake map breakdowns and all that stuff, and the links for of each video. So thank you very much for the support of the channel. Me and my family really appreciate that. Okay, one of the things about bass fishing that I love more than anything else is this seasonal change and seasonal movement and seasonal mood shifts in the bass. And this is one of the things that a lot of people miss, because if you're a spotlighter, this is not even in a universe you even care anything about. It doesn't make any difference for that percentage of bass that spotlighters target. But for real bass fishing, traditional real bass fishing, learning to master the seasonal movements and patterns of fish and how they adapt to different changes in the year is one of the pillars and the foundations of becoming a good angler. So throughout the course of the year, there are certain periods that there are big changes in what the bass do. They're constantly changing, and they're constantly doing different stuff and having different type of behaviors. But for me, one of the most marked changes occurs right now, 1st of September, first week of September, and I want to talk a little bit about that. Okay, first of all, during this transition of September, we are in a transitional month into fall right now, into early fall, in the very beginning stages of it. This is the toughest time of year to fish. Without a doubt, the two toughest months of the year, in my opinion, to fish are August and September. I think September is actually a little bit tougher, and there's a lot of different reasons for this, and I want to talk about that today and give you guys some tips on how to overcome that a little bit. But one of the reasons that fishing is very tough in September is the bass are scattered all over the place, and they probably school in large groups less than any other time of the year. So you have a lot of like little bitty wolf packs of bass or lone rogue bass or individual bass that are literally all over a lake. If you have a typical man-made impoundment that has average water clarity of say 2 to 4 foot, you're apt to catch a bass in a foot of water or 40 foot of water and everywhere in between. They can be on the bottom, they can be suspended, in various depths. They can use any type of cover. They can be in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever depth of water, and use every type of cover. So given that, it's like finding a needle in a stack of needles a lot of times to locate these bass in September. So one of the things about it is a lot of the diversity of cover that bass use in September, a lot of it depends on the stage of the thermocline. Thermoclines usually start to break up a little bit this time of year. So as the thermoclines break up, you have more suitable living conditions in deeper water. So September is sort of the start of the period where bass start to go deeper on the bottom. If you've noticed in the summertime of the year, like during June, July, and August, bass tend to, about the deepest that they get on the bottom is 25 or 30 feet. And they'll suspend a lot of times over deeper water, but actually using that bottom depth bottoms out about there. But in September, that opens it up a little bit, especially if you have a lake that has some current in it, where that thermocline is not really established. So number one, the bass go deeper. That's one option there. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you may have some bass that are moving deeper and deeper and deeper, some bass are moving shallower and shallower and shallower because they're taking advantage of that late bluegill spawn, the late perch spawn. They're up there chasing perch in really shallow water. So where do you begin at? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of my favorite ways to take on the challenge of September fishing in a typical man-made impoundment. I know if you're fishing a natural body of water or, a river or something like that, it's going to be a little different. But for most dudes out there that fish a man-made lake, here's a good rule of thumb to remember with that. First of all, if you want to fish a little bit deeper and you want to fish offshore in September, one of the things that you have to realize is that where the bass are going to be located in September in a little bit deeper water is completely relative to your water clarity. If you have a lake that has water visibility over 3 foot or so, 3 or 4 foot of water, you're still going to have a lot of bass suspended out over that deeper water, especially if you have a lake that has a mixed species of like spotted bass and largemouth. So one of the things that is a really, really strong pattern in the month of September when you're fishing out off the bank a little bit is fishing a drop shot for suspended fish. And the best way to do this with traditional two-dimensional sonar, I'm not going to give any tips and advice on using the cheater box because you don't need to be using the cheater box to begin with, but two-dimensional sonar, which is really all you need, one good way to do it, one simple way to do it, is to basically just graph around like steep banks and points and around creek channel drop-offs, creek channel ledges, any type of typical offshore structure that the fish would get on, like on the bottom, and graph out there in anywhere between, say, 20 to 50 foot of water and look for bait balls. Look for balls of shad out there. Now, you don't necessarily have to see the fish on your two-dimensional sonar to catch them as far as the bass, but if you notice these shad balls out there suspended out off those points and off those ledges and steep banks, get as close as you can to those shad balls and take like a drop shot with like a foot long leader on it, a 1/4 ounce, drop shot weight, little 4-inch worm, and just pitch it out like 10 foot in front of the boat and just shake it down into that zone where you see most of those bait fish are at, and just work your way down the bank or around the point doing that. Make little 10-foot pitches. As the boat's getting closer to your drop shot, eventually you're going to be vertical underneath it. That's one good way to catch them in the month of September, especially if you have a lake that's got a big spotted bass population. And if you have a lake that has submergent or standing timber. Bass are notorious on lakes that have submerged timber to suspend in the month of September and be caught on a drop shot. I have found personally myself in the month of September, if I want to fish deep like that, I catch a lot more vertical fishing than I do like casting a little swim bait. So that's one option. The next option for September fishing that I want to share with you guys is topwater fishing. Topwater fishing in September, it sort of marks that time of the year where you can pick up a topwater and you can throw it all day long and catch fish all day long on it. Other times of the year, not so much. Other time of year, there are windows during the day where they bite a topwater better, and it's usually associated with some type of shade. But there's a transition again that takes place in the first part of September where you can put a topwater on, usually a whopper plopper, a buzz bait, maybe a prop bait or a walking bait, and just cover water with it. It doesn't matter if it's cloudy, sunny, windy, or calm. It's just a matter of making just a massive number of casts, because these fish that you're targeting in September on that topwater, these are those lone rogue cruising bass that I'm talking about that are out looking for perch or looking for crawdads up shallow. The water, the oxygen contents may be a little bit better up there. The daylight hours are getting shorter. There's a combination of things, and that topwater lure, you can get bites all day long on it if you throw it enough. And when you're talking about what causes this transition, before we get into the next little thing here, in my opinion, in September, the number one thing that signals this transition is the shortening daylight hours. This is one thing, guys, that is not talked about enough in bass fishing. Everybody talks about like cold fronts and water temperatures dropping and water clarity changing, especially like water temperatures dropping into the fall. In my personal experience, I think that the daylight hours decreasing has more of an impact on bass movement and behavior than any other factor, including water temperature. I think that's ingrained in their DNA, It's part of their natural cycles that they've developed over millions of years on this planet. And that's what causes these definitive changes in feeding habits, is those shortening daylight hours. It just is what it is with that. Okay, topwater, one thing. The next thing that works really good, guys, is pitching and flipping any type of shallow targets. You know, whatever shallow target your lake has. Pads, grass, docks, lay down trees, stumps, anything. Could be whatever you're there. Pitching and flipping some type of a small soft plastic, if the water visibility is anywhere between, you know, say 1.5 feet or greater, like a little Zoom finesse worm's really good. Just some type of little small soft plastic. Pitching it and flipping around that shallow cover is really good. If you have dirty water, like really, really dirty water of like 6 inches to 1 foot visibility, a full-size jig, you know, like my, you know, throwback jig that I make, some type of a dark color like a black and blue or black and chartreuse. But that full-size jig in September, it'll get you some good bites around shallow cover in off-colored water. And finally, guys, my favorite way to catch them in September, and I've talked about this if you've watched the channel a lot, because it works so good, is throwing a little crankbait in dirty water. That's my number one go-to deal. I love to do that. That Megabass Super Z2 crankbait's my go-to bait. I basically look for the dirtiest water that I can find in the lake and fish whatever is up there. It could be a wing dam, it could be a riprap bank, it could be the edge of a grass bed, it could be along a lay-down stump or lay-down tree or in the water, something like that. But a little crankbait that's like 1 inch to 1.25 inches long is deadly in the fall time of the year, in the early fall of September. And don't think by going to a little tiny crankbait that you're just after catching, you know, keeper fish. I've caught big ones doing that. I caught a 7-pound, 2-ouncer late at the Potomac River in a Bassmaster Top 150 tournament, which was the biggest bass I've ever seen caught on the Potomac River on the tournaments I've been there, on a little bitty tiny crankbait. So that's just a few things that work, guys. Just be prepared for it to be slow. Be prepared for it to be tough, because it is going to be. I mean, unless you're fishing up north for smallmouth and those Great Lakes and those big smallmouth lakes up north, it's going to be a grind in September. You know, if you're fishing a public body of water, it starts to get a little bit better, you know, in October when the water temperatures start to cool off and the daylight hours even start to get cooler and cooler, or shorter and shorter. But for now, you know, just accept the fact that when you go September, it's probably going to be a little bit hard to get a bite. So hope it helps out, guys. We'll talk later.